Welcome back to America's Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. This segment is brought to you by CommercialAgentSuccess.com. Check it out. It is incredible training for commercial real estate agents, and you'll find it at CommercialAgentSuccess.com. Well, today we're talking with Jim Berry, and he's U.S. Real Estate Practice Leader with Deloitte. And they have an annual report they put out, 2020 Commercial Real Estate Outlook. If you own real estate, the more you own, the more you should be reading this report. We'll put a link in the show notes at creshow.com so you can find the actual report there. And we're talking with Jim about some of the highlights. And Jim, you talked about location, information, analytics, kind of tenant experience, some strategies and tips for some of these owners. What are some examples that you could share with them?
Yeah, so as we've looked through that and some of the information that we gathered within our survey, which once again covered 750 global real estate owners and operators, some meaningful things like 58% of them really are primarily focused on the use of technology and the experience within the environmental range. So that's kind of that's kind of been the natural evolution. So that's lights, that's the overall utilities, some of those kind of things, which has really evolved nicely from in a kind of a natural use. So, fairly high percentage, but still 58%, 55% around security. So once again, continuing to see that escalate and how best to intertwine security. But the reality is all of that kind of keeps moving forward and more opportunities. And then 49% are only 49%, so less than 50% on mobile apps. And if you think about the way people are interacting overall today, with whether or not it's with how they shop, it's how they decide where they're going to dinner, it's how they work and play. I mean, it's really some of those things where you're really going to that on-demand economy and how better to interact with the users of your building, whether not just the tenant, the individuals who are visiting, the individuals who are the ultimate end user. So how best to make it easier for them? And maybe a couple of examples. Let's go back to security. Is it just enough to have overall security in the building? Think about from the perspective of cameras and the interactivity of that, which are great. But what about 24/7 monitoring that could then be translated into the actual end user customer, so your employees and how they can interact better in the security environment, being more aware and more educated on some of those kinds of things as well. It's about on security. It's also about how do you recognize the fact that there are opportunities now from a cyber perspective to actually infiltrate your data and security and cause an event within your building, whether or not it's just shutting down your building or causing access issues or whatever. So all of those things I think are continuing to evolve, but I think those are three key areas that every real estate company is and should continue to focus on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you think about an app for an office building or a shopping center or a school or any type of real estate where if there's a security alert, an app could let all the respondents know. Imagine if somebody meant harm coming in with a weapon to a building and everyone in the building all of a sudden knows about it, he might be in trouble. There might be a lot more armed people heading his way. There are tremendous opportunities out there really for environmental and for security. What else are some examples that owners might think about?
Yeah, and so as people keep looking at some of the other opportunities that are out there, I mentioned we just talking about broader aspect and discussion of the Internet of Things, which at the end of the day is really all the technologies that exist out there under an umbrella, and it's how information can be gathered, learned, and applied, which then gets us into artificial intelligence. The great thing about artificial intelligence is, much of the technology is there today. I mean, it positions itself around the lines of both machine learning, deep learning. There's also aspects of natural language processing, some things that are already there and in place and can be used. Interestingly enough, once again, within our survey results, I would say real estate companies are just now scratching the surface of how and what to use from an artificial intelligence perspective. Uh, a lot of it now is focused on the back office. It's focused around finance and gathering and assemblage of information, but hasn't really progressed in through some of the learning. How do you gather information that you now have, and how do you make that more useful? How do you use the actual machine learning and advanced learning technology that's out there now to better predict traffic patterns, to better predict utility usage, to better predict the needs of your tenants because of how they interact, of their come and go, or any of those kinds of things. It's really a next stage and a next level of thinking. I think that really presents the opportunity for real estate companies for a lot of technology that's out there today.
Yeah. Well, Jim, was there any difference in your respondents' view of the future or the market or technology or anything that jumped out to you that was kind of sector based? Obviously we've got a couple sectors doing really, really well with industrial and multifamily. What did you hear from them about the various sectors?
Yeah, and I mean, and the reality, and first off, I would say overall, I mean, from a sector perspective, clearly there's a couple that are outperforming and a couple that are still working their way through. So there are different. Uh, we do drill down into where some of those various ones stage, but I'll talk to you a little bit about a couple that you mentioned. So first off, from the industrial space, I mean, industrial is not just a space anymore. I think that it might be a really prime example of how real estate owners and operators and investors have looked at it different and said, no, we're logistics. We're part of a logistics chain anymore. And so how do we operate may be fundamentally different. I mean, clearly where we position those industrial properties and how we get in and out of, and how we have an established ability to help our tenant manage inventory differently, all become critical elements of it. But also looking at it as, hey, what size do we need? How do we set in micro stations along the way? So it's not just maybe one big facility. You may have that as the hub, but then how do you use other real estate, throughout the major metropolitan areas to make accessibility to product and accessibility to inventory that much quicker and that much easier for the ultimate end user.
So that's industrial. You said you want to mention another one. Is that multifamily or retail's kind of going through some changes?
Retail actually blends into that, right? So
Right.
as an end user of some of the things we just talked about, and also as a reuse of space, I think retailers, and once again, I think we tend to put retail in a single box, right? And we say retail. Well, there's various types of retail owners, and there's various types of retail properties. Overall, I would say retail is, in a lot of ways, is finding its way under the new economy. But there's definitely repurposing that's having to occur. And so what is that going to mean? I think maybe to tie it into that last statement discussion about, the natural time to industrial, having a better use of maybe excess space in a retail off or in a retail center or retail store, to have that as one of the secondary drop off for some of the inventory that can then be distributed out even from there, is maybe a good example. Or just, data center reconversion, some different things that are actually happening within the space and how to best use that. Multifamily's been on a great run, and I think everybody feels overall still good about it. But it is, but multifamily also, it's not like it's as easy as just collecting the rent check, because if you, once again, high need for tenant experience, high amenity, uh, really having to gauge the generational needs and the expectations that our on-demand economy is really driving now. Having to think about if your tenants, how they interact, and so how do you set up mechanisms for them to better receive deliveries, for them to better receive the the advantages that they want to take part in from from the economy that we have today is also foundational. In addition, the cap rates are low. I mean, so the actual returns and managing that, looking at buy and at what stage of buying and expansion and conversion of properties is critical decisions that multifamily is facing today. But overall, still very strong.
So when you interview these CRE C-suite owners of a lot of properties, how do they feel
Right.
about the availability of debt and equity moving forward?
Yeah, still feel very positive, and I think that's one of the things that is really gratifying right now. So when you look at it, I mean, first off, just availability of capital. I mean, there's an enormous amount of capital that wants to play in real estate and play in the long term. And as we look through that, it's interesting because I always think back over a continuum of time. And what I love about where we are now is real estate really has uh, achieved a level of maturity where the investing public has them as not only a steady stake, but also a steady stake, realizing that we may have a slowdown at some point. We may have to work through. We will, it's inevitable, have to work through some level of downturn or recession. But making plays in a long-term nature and a long-term asset that's willing to sustain that, realizing that the longer-term return will be there.
Yeah, it seems like people that we talk to and deal with are really less concerned about the long-term outlook of commercial real estate. Well,
Right.
Jim, as you went through this report and you guys did these surveys of these owners, is there anything that surprised you about the report this year or that jumped out to you as most important to leave our audience with?
Once again, I would say that it's that evolution of how people look at real estate, and so that phrase that we use about moving from location, location, location to more of location, experience, and analytics, and really taking the time to make sure that real estate companies are refining their strategy. So a company is going to look and evaluate a office building, a potential retail site, a tenant moving into multifamily, as much on the experience as the location. And how are they going to manage their lives around and best interact with that piece of real estate? The other thing that I would say that was an interesting point and something for us to all focus on in real estate, even though it does bridge beyond real estate, and that is talent. I mean, we are at this pivotal point where in real estate, the need to attract talent and retain talent, has never been more important. We're in a true competitive situation across a vibrant economy, but it's also evolving past just all the focus being on attract and retain. It's really how do you retain, and it's really reskilling a lot of our labor force. Because remember, there's an enormous amount of experience that exists within core real estate that's been built up over time. The skill sets that those individuals need to be able to deploy in today's economy and with the day technology may be evolving and changing, but that experience is really hard to replicate. And so, how do you find that nice blend where you're also investing in your employees and making sure that you're retooling and reskilling those employees as a vibrant part of your overall talent strategy?
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of baby boomers out there with a lot of commercial real estate experience, and I guess I'm one of them, and you are one of them, right? So we need to help these young people kind of move along and get some of the experience and share our experiences with them. And thank you today for sharing some of your experience with them. And then we need to learn from them with some use of technology, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Jim, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you being on the show.
Michael, thank you as always. Thanks for having me on America's Commercial Real Estate Show.
If you'd like more information from Jim, we'll have his contact information on the show website at creshow.com, where you also find all of our shows. On this show, the Deloitte show, you'll find a link to the actual report. Like I said, if you own real estate, the more you own, the more you should read the report. Well, thank you for being with us. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for sharing the show. And hey, please do connect with us or give us a call on the old-fashioned app, the telephone. Till next week, please always lead, learn, and laugh, and join us for America's Commercial Real Estate Show. America's Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Bull Realty. For customized asset and occupancy solutions, visit bullrealty.com. Commercial Agent Success Strategies. Incredible training for commercial agents. Visit commercialagentsuccess.com.